Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to this really special video where we are going to basically build a small scale project, but we're going to cover all the different pieces. So we are going to create the application and we're ultimately going to have it deployed on Amazon Web Services, aka AWS. Now, we're not going to go super in-depth with any of these particular pieces, so this is not necessarily a Node.js in-depth tutorial. It's more about putting all the pieces together and actually being a proficient software developer, because this might actually be the most important part. So hopefully you guys are excited, and yeah, let's get started. ClickUp. It's truly one app to replace them all, allowing you to manage all of your development work in one place. You'll no longer need to switch between project management, wikis, spreadsheets, and chat apps. ClickUp replaces all of these apps and integrates heavily with apps you still want to keep using. Best of all, they got an industry-leading, forever free plan that supports unlimited tasks and unlimited users. With over 100,000 teams switching to ClickUp in under 2 years, there's every reason for you to give it a shot. Even teams from Google, Tesla, Airbnb, Uber, and more. I'll leave a link for you guys in the description. Now the goal here is to have it such that we make a change locally on our project, and we're going to have those changes automatically propagate to AWS. So we're going to set up a pipeline to do that, and I'll be showing you guys that entire process. All right, so what are we going to do to get started? The very first thing is you're going to need to install Node.js. So if you're already a Node.js developer, then maybe this is like too basic for you, but just stick with me for a second. Hit this download button if you're brand new, and that will go through the installation process. You literally just click the buttons, it's super easy. Now I am on Mac. This is going to be pretty similar on Windows. The only difference here is some of the terminal commands might be different. But if you want to follow along exactly, one, you can use a Mac, or two, you can use a tool to make it a little bit easier. So for example, you can download Git, which will give you some of the same commands such as ls, pwd, all that good stuff. Or you can just figure out how to do everything on Windows, but that might require a little bit of extra steps, looking up some commands if you don't know them. Anyways, get this downloaded and installed. It should just take a minute. Now when you're done, open the terminal, and if it doesn't look as cool and pretty as mine, what you can do is you can go to terminal preferences and you can customize it here. You can make your own profile, and then all you gotta do is go shell new window, and you can select that, and it'll open up nice and cool like this cool green one. Now to make sure Node is installed, you can say npm and see that a bunch of stuff comes back. So that means it's installed and we can start working with it. So what we're gonna do is we're going to be working inside of our own folder. So we're gonna say mkdir for make directory, and we are going to call this Node. Here's where you would put your project name. So if you're gonna have numerous projects, you might wanna make a Node directory, and then inside that make another directory for each one of your projects. But I'm just gonna work with one here, and that's gonna be called Node. And then we can say cd node to travel to that path, and you can see that's the directory we're in right now. And now that we're here, we can actually create a Node.js project. And the way you do that is you say npm init, and then you can say -- yes, just to bypass one of the prompts, and then there you go. So what is this junk here? Well, this is actually a particular file, package.json, and that's pretty much how you establish your Node.js application. So there's nothing really in here, so we're gonna add some stuff in here. This is where you put all your dependencies. So if you need any particular pieces of software or pieces of code that is available, then you can pull that in here. So for example, we're going to say npm install express. And we're going to use that tool to make a web server which will listen to requests. So that's going to install. It should just take a minute. And there you go. Now we're also going to install mongodb. We might use that for this project, just depends on how long everything takes. Enter. But you can see that you can just install whatever dependencies you might need. It doesn't have to be these exact ones. And then lastly, we're going to say npm install nodemon, which is optional, but this is basically going to make our life a little bit easier because it will basically refresh our server anytime we make changes so that we don't have to stop our server and restart it all of the time. And it'll change how you launch your application just a little bit, but it's very minor and it's very easy to use. So now what you can do is you can say less package.json, And you can see in here, this is that original file I just showed you. You can see we have these dependencies here, and we have Express, MongoDB, and NodeMon. So we're starting to establish ourselves and get our dependencies. You can press Q to quit. And what we want to do now is we want to open this directory in a text editor. Now, if you have code, Visual Studio Code set up all the way, you might just be able to say code dot, which will open the current directory. I don't have it set up that way, so I'm just going to follow this path in the text editor and open that folder. So we're going to open up Visual Studio Code, File, Open, and we can see I'm already in that folder. So we open Node and click Open. Now you can use this button here and you can see the folder right here, and we got this package.json file right here. Now, the next step is we need to create an actual file because we have this project, but it's not going to do anything until we actually type some code. So to do that, we're going to right-click New File, and we're going to call this app.js. You may also see index.js, but this works for now. So we're going to put the boilerplate code in here. So this is the bare minimum just to get your project working. So minimize this here, X out of some of this junk, and follow along. Now let's see if I can remember this. Const express, so we're going to create a variable to reference the express that we pulled into the project through the dependencies. And you're going to say require, and in the parentheses, you're going to require express. Now, I did say a variable. Constant might be a better term, but we're not going to get into that for now. But basically, it's a variable that you can't change, and const is the recommended for modern JavaScript. So const, and we're going to say app, and we're going to type out this, which will allow us to use Express in our application, and we reference everything we need through app. So for example, one of the most important methods is app.listen, and this will basically make the web server listen on a particular port. So the ports are like the doors to access the web server, and we can define what port right here. So we're going to start with 3000. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a callback function which will execute when we access the web server from a client. So the callback function syntax is going to look like this: parentheses, arrow, curly braces. And then press enter inside the curly braces, and here is where our code's going to go. We'll just say console log and just put something that we absolutely know that we put it there. What's up? All right. So this is the boilerplate code. This is to get our application working. And now we can start building out more paths. So for example, we can say app.get, which is one of the HTTP methods, and we can say the path of just a /. So when we access the very first page, and we're going to take this and we're actually going to put this up here. All right. So what's going to happen when we access the home page? Let's create another callback function. And this one is going to have two parameters here, and we're going to say req for the request right there, and then res for the response. So we can access different things inside of those parameters. And we're going to say res.send. This will basically give a response to the client when they access the home page. And all we're going to do is we're just going to say, welcome to the home page, baby. All right. So in theory, this works, but we're going to try it. So how do you actually try this? Well, you need to go back to the terminal. We're just going to clear the screen here, and you can say node app.js. And this will run your application, or if you're using NodeMon, the dependency we installed, you can put that there, and that's the only difference you have to do. So NodeMon app.js. Enter. And you can see we get the response WhatsApp, which comes from this code here. So when our application starts, this WhatsApp is going to be put inside of the console. Now, when we visit the web page from a web browser, we want to get this inside of the response. So let's do that. We're going to open a web browser, and you're going to visit localhost :3000. And it says, welcome to the home page, baby. Sweet. So you just created your very first Node.js application following this video. Maybe it's not your first. I don't know. I don't know your life. Next step is we're going to try to get this application up on AWS. So what we need to do is we need to go to AWS. That's at aws.amazon.com and then sign into the console. Now you'll need to create an account if you haven't done that, and when you do this you should get a year of various services being free, and then some services are always free even after the year. But I think you should be good to use the services here for a year, but I'm not entirely positive. So just be careful not to make anything too crazy because you will get charged. So the service we're going to be using is actually called Elastic Beanstalk. It's a little tiny here, so let me zoom in. And this is a service to very easily launch applications on AWS. And you can see I have one of the servers here, which is just another variation of what I'm doing here, but we're going to build this from scratch. So what we're going to do, the way you would do this, you would say create a new application and put all this information in here. But before we do that, we're going to take a look at another thing we're going to be using. So if you click Services, scroll all the way down, and under Developer Tools, Code Pipeline. So we're going to be using this, and this will basically build a pipeline such that when we make a change on our project, it propagates to Amazon Web Services. And you can see there's tons of variations. There's deploy, build, and source, and you can look through all those and learn that stuff if you want. But I'm just going to hit Create Pipeline and give it some name. We're just going to call it Node, and that'll fill the role name for a new service role. And then next. Now the source provider, see there's like a ton of different pieces that have to go in for this to work. This is where you put the source code repository. So where are you storing your project? So which one do we want to use? Oh, so many options. We're going to go with GitHub. Connect to GitHub, and you'll probably want to create a GitHub account and sign in. And when you sign in, it will finish that way. And then you can select a repository. Now, we don't actually have a repository in GitHub yet. We have not done that. So what we need to do is before we can even continue on to AWS, we need to create a GitHub repository for our project. So you can see we're getting a lot of different pieces here in this one little video. So what you need to do is you need to sign up for GitHub, create an account, it's completely free. And then what you're going to do is you're going to hit this plus button and say new repository. Give it a name. We're just going to call it Node. Give it a description if you want. I'm going to keep it public. Now, this is important. Skip this step if you're importing an existing repository. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip this step, and we're going to create that repository locally. So we'll hit create repository, and there you go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new repository on the command line by following these steps. So you'll need to download Git at git-scm.com and then download. It works a similar way that when it's installed, you should be able to go to a terminal and type in Git and get some response. So if we cancel out of this by holding Control and pressing C, you can just say Git, and you can see we get a bunch of junk pop up on the screen, so it should be ready to go. And now all we gotta do is follow the steps. This echo isn't really necessary, but that's just to create a readme file if you really want. So we're just gonna say git init, we're going to add that file. In this case, we can add the files we already have. If you're creating a brand new repository, you probably wanna have at least one file, which is why we do this readme. And we're gonna commit our changes and push those to our GitHub profile. So we say git remote add origin and then put this web address. So I'm actually just going to copy, we'll copy all this stuff. And then all we have to do manually is say git init and then git add our files. I'm gonna clear the screen and say git init, initialized empty git repository. Make sure you're in the right folder. We're in /node. And what you can do here is you can say git status, and that's gonna show all of our files here. And if you were to proceed with these commands here, you're going to be checking into our repository all of this stuff. And you don't always want to check in everything. What to check in and what not to check in, this is something people fight about, but what we're going to do is we're just going to commit the absolute essentials. So what we need to do is we need to actually create a git ignore. So let's clear the screen, and what you're going to do is say npx git ignore node, press enter. Hopefully this works. And now what we can do is you can say ls, and we have this, if you do ls-a, you can see we have this .gitignore file, which will basically tell Git which files to not check in. So now what we can do is we can say git status, and you can see things are a little bit different. So we have the git ignore here, but we don't have that folder of dependencies. So scrolling up, you can see we used to have these node modules. We don't have that anymore because those can be downloaded when you have the package.json file. So now you can say git add dot to add everything in the current directory, enter. Git status to see that those are ready to be committed, git commit. Actually, these are everything we copy and pasted. So all this right here, you can just copy and paste that. So when that's done, it should be up in GitHub. Let's go check to see if it's there. All you have to do is go to the same page you're on and hit refresh. And you can see all of our code is up on GitHub. So that's cool. It wasn't too bad. Now we can go back to the code pipeline in AWS, and we can do a refresh here. Looks like we might have to restart. I don't know if there was a way to refresh the available GitHub repos, but we're not going to worry about it. We're going to go with node, next, source provider, GitHub, connect to GitHub. Now we have to choose a repository. So we're going to scroll through here and select node. Branch, we're going to go with the master branch. So anytime we push to that master branch, it's automatically going to propagate to AWS. Hit next. Now that we're at this build stage, you can choose a build provider. If you want to add a little bit more substance to this pipeline, you can do that. But we're going to keep it thin, and we're just going to skip this by selecting skip build stage. Your pipeline will not include a build stage. Are you sure you want to skip this stage? Yes. Now you need to have a deploy stage. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down here and we're going to say AWS Elastic Beanstalk, and here is where you would choose your application to deploy to. So when you go into Elastic Beanstalk, you can create an application, and the files for that application are going to come from this pipeline. So at this point, it would be appropriate to go create an Elastic Beanstalk application. So open up services, and right click, open a new tab, Elastic Beanstalk, head there, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a new application. We're going to call it node, and we're going to hit create. Going back to the code pipeline, we're just going to put that name in here for the application name, node. And now for the environment, we need to go create that as well. So that's what shows up here when we create our Elastic Beanstalk application. So we'll click create one now, and we're going to go with the web server environment, select, and the environment node-env, that's the name we're going to use. So we can copy that, and we're going to paste that inside of the environment name. Let's go back for just a second and look through this stuff. The platform, we're just going to go with Node.js, and I guess we'll just go with sample application for this option here, and create environment. All right, so this is going to create, and in the process, we can go to the code pipeline, use node-env, and hit next. Review all of this junk here, and create the pipeline. I'm actually going to get some screenshots just if I need to reference any of this junk. Hit create pipeline. All right, the pipeline has been created. All right, so source in progress, and now it has succeeded. And the deploy failed. Oh no. So what that means is it was able to get the source code from our GitHub repo. That all looked good, but deploying it to the AWS environment, no luck. Probably because it's not done yet. It's not done even setting up. So we need to wait for this to work, and then we'll go from there. All right. appears to be done. Okay, now what? Maybe we could retry this. Yeah, so let's go back to code pipeline, hit retry, and see what happens. It's in progress. Come on, please work. Please work. Yes! Yes! Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right, so it succeeded at deploying to our environment. It looks good. All right, now this is the hard part. How do we visit the web page? Oh, I forget. Oh, here it is, URL. Slap that. 502 bad gateway, yeah. So that's the end of the tutorial. I'm just playing. Oh, I'm just gonna request logs by hitting logs over here, and we're just gonna get the last 100 lines. Download that bad boy. So it might be like a port issue because we hard coded 3000. We got some different ports floating around here. I'm not entirely sure, but we can debug this, no problem. So let's X out of those logs and let's try to improve our code. So to compare this to another project I did a similar thing for, this one's actually private, so you guys probably won't be able to see this, but you can see it works with private repositories just the same. We can go into app.js, and I have secret codes in here, so I'm not going to show you that part, but I will show you the important part. So let me find it real quick. Here it is. So here we have port 3000 or process.env.port. So basically if there is a preference from the environment that it doesn't want to use 3000 and it has a different port to use, it'll use that port first, and if that's not met, then we'll use 3000. So this is what we're actually going to do. We're going to take this line here and we're going to go back to our Node.js project, paste that right here, and then instead of using 3000, the number here, we're going to use this port variable. All right, so we saved that, and now how do we get that up to Amazon? And this is actually good practice because this is part of the process. We just need to make a commit to the master branch. So let's go back to the terminal, which by the way, here's a little cool trick. If you're in Visual Studio Code, you can actually go to help, type in terminal, and I'll tell you how to find it. You can go view, terminal, and you can do it right here if you want. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say clear, and we're going to say get status, and we can see we have one change, app.js. So we'll just say git add app.js, git commit, make some message for it. Then you just say git push origin. And if you want to be more specific, if you have branches, you can say git push origin master, which I already pushed everything, so it's fine. But if you're using multiple branches, you might want to do that. So now if we go check out a repository, first check out the code pipeline. You can see that a new deployment is in progress. And then over in GitHub, we can check out our code and see that it was just pushed a minute ago. And here is our new code. So it's up on GitHub, it's propagating through Amazon, and hopefully everything works out just great. All right, so the deployment succeeded. Now let's take a look at our environment. All right, it looks like it's ready to go. So let's visit and see if it works. Oh, nothing. I think there's actually one more change that we'll want to do. So we'll try that out. If we go into configuration and then in software, hit modify, and then you can configure all kinds of stuff in here. But one thing is we want to set an environment property to say what port we want to use. And we're going to go with port 8081 and hit apply. And we'll let that propagate, but if I understand things correctly, which I probably don't, if we take a look at these logs, whoops, let me look at the other one, the newer one. You can see that the server's running at this IP address with 8081 as the port. So I think we just need to set that in the configuration, but we shall see. So let this update our environment, and then we'll refresh our page and see what happens. But if you are getting a 502 bad gateway and you try all these things and nothing happens, just do some research. Type it in Google and figure out the answer. All right, let's give it a try. Welcome to the home page, baby. There you go. That is how you take a Node.js application and get it up on AWS. Anytime you make changes, it should show up right here. See, check this out. We go into our code, we say updated, then go in our terminal and commit that. Then we can push that. Now all you gotta do is wait, and eventually your web page will update. So in a couple minutes, I'll do a refresh on this page and we will see that hopefully our new message appears. All right, it's been a minute. I'm gonna hit refresh And look at that, it says updated.